Before Wall Street existed, before Silicon Valley dreamed of unicorns, there was company, one that didn't just dominate markets, it invented them. A business so powerful it printed its own currency, raised armies, and declared war. It didn't answer to any king, because it was more powerful than most nations. Adjusted for inflation, it was worth over $7.9 trillion, more than Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta combined. Enough wealth to buy McDonald's, Walmart, and Samsung and still have spare change. It didn't just trade spices, it colonized trade itself. It monetized people, nations, and war. This was the first truly multinational corporation, and it didn't just reshape business, it rewrote architecture of power. This is the story of the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, and the capitalist empire that never really ended. In 1602, the Dutch Republic had a problem. They were locked in a costly war with Spain, and the Portuguese were monopolizing the world's most profitable trade, Asian spices. Their solution wasn't military alone, it was financial, strategic, revolutionary. They created Verenigde Oost-Indische Company, or Dutch East India Company, the first corporation in history built not for a single voyage, but for a perpetual global conquest. Backed by the Dutch Parliament, the VOC wasn't just a business. It was granted the power to wage war, sign treaties, build colonies, and execute justice. And for the first time in human history, shares of such a powerful entity were offered to the public. Not just nobles, but bakers, artisans, servants. This was capitalism's birth cry. The VOC raised over 6.5 million guilders, over $100 million today, becoming the first publicly traded multinational and the world's most powerful machine of profit. At its peak, the VOC owned hundreds of ships, dozens of trading posts, and moved tons of nutmegs, silver, tea, and opium across the globe. Its workforce stretched over 50,000 people, from clerks in Amsterdam to enslaved workers in Asia. Adjusted for modern value, it would be worth an astonishing $7.9 trillion, more than Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta combined. But with all that power came a dark price: exploitation, enslavement, and the invention of corporate imperialism. At the turn of the 17th century, Europe's richest prize was spice: nutmeg, clover, pepper, more valuable than gold. The Portuguese controlled the roots, the Spanish enforced them. But the Dutch had a new idea: if you can beat them, build something bigger. So in 1602, they consolidated competing merchants into a single corporate war machine, the Dutch East India Company, or VOC. Backed by the Dutch Parliament, the VOC was more than a business. It could sign treaties, wage war, occupy territory, execute prisoners. And it did so with something unheard of at the time: public money. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens, not just kings, could buy shares in global enterprise. Blacksmiths, baker, even domestic servants joined a speculative frenzy. This was capitalism's Big Bang. With an IPO worth over 6.5 million guilders, more than $100 million today, the VOC built the largest private fleet the world had ever seen. Over 4,700 ships, more than 50,000 employees, a fortified network of ports from Africa to Japan. And all of it served one purpose: total market domination. The VOC didn't partner with local economies, it absorbed them. Where it could not negotiate, it conquered. Where it could not outbid, it outgunned. And in 1621, on the Banda Island, the only place on earth where nutmeg grow, the VOC committed an act of genocide. Over 14,000 were massacred or enslaved. In Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, they built a militarized corporate capital powered by slave labor. The VOC created a vertical monopoly from production to sale, like Amazon or Walmart today, but with its own navy and colonial troops. And all of this was legal, profitable, shareholder approved. The Dutch didn't just invent the corporation, they showed the world how one could behave like sovereign empire and get away with it. The VOC wasn't an anomaly. It was a prototype for what happens when a company is accountable only to profit, not to people. The VOC didn't just succeed in dominating global trade, it systematically built a corporate empire. And what's most astonishing, its operational model still shapes our economy 400 years later. Let's break down the system, a machine of wealth, violence, and financial genius. First, monopoly with state power. Backed by the Dutch Parliament in 1602, the VOC was granted a 21-year monopoly over all Dutch trade in Asia. But this wasn't just an exclusive license, it was a sovereign charter. The VOC could negotiate treaties, build fortresses, maintain armies, enforce laws, imprison dissenters, and even wage war, all in the name of private profit. Think of it as an Amazon with legal power of the Pentagon. In practice, the VOC became a state within a state, executing orders faster and more ruthlessly than many European governments. And they didn't just enforce this monopoly legally, they enforced it militarily. Ports were blockaded, rivals were sunk. Where negotiation failed, they fired cannons. Second, vertical integration on a global scale. The VOC didn't rely on partnerships. It grew its own nutmeg and cloves, built its own ships in Dutch shipyards, trained its own soldiers and clerks, stored cargo in the VOC-only warehouses, sold directly in European markets through exclusive auctions. The entire value chain, from Banda soil to Amsterdam coin, was under one roof. It was what modern business calls vertical integration, but unlike Walmart or Apple, the VOC could kill to protect it. The control wasn't just about profit, it was about ensuring no one else could even try to compete. Third, financial engineering before Wall Street. This is where the VOC truly changed history. It introduced the modern concept of shares. For the first time, anyone, bakers, servants, merchants, could invest in global trade. The company raised 6.5 million guilders, equivalent to over $100 million today, through a public IPO, the first in the world. They invented dual-class shares, governors versus ordinary investors, fractional share ownerships, futures contract, maritime insurance, and even early forms of derivatives trading. Amsterdam became the Wall Street of the 1600s, with VOC stock traded daily. A shareholder named Jan Allert made one of history's first stock trades for profit in 1603, before New York even existed. These financial tools allowed the Dutch to spread risk, scale globally, and outfinance their rivals. Britain was borrowing at 10% of interest, the VOC just 4%. That meant they could invest more, expand faster, and fight longer. Fourth, corporate enforcement without ethics. Today, corporations send legal teams. The VOC sent battalions. When local traders in Banda Island refused to sell nutmeg exclusively, the VOC conducted one of the first genocide of the modern era. Tens of thousands were enslaved, starved, or killed. The population fell from 15,000 to under 1,000. In Batavia, now Jakarta, they built a militarized hub powered by slave labor. If someone resisted VOC terms, they were tried and executed without trial. In the world of the VOC, there was no Geneva Convention, just quarterly earnings. But even machines break. The very system that made the VOC unstoppable became its curse. Communication between Amsterdam and Java could take over a year. Corruption spread through distant outposts. Commander made side deals, hid wealth, and sabotaged rifles. Internal warfare drained cash. Bribes became routine. The once lean machine became a bloated bureaucracy drowning in its own ambition. By the mid-1700s, the VOC was collapsing, buried under debt, scandal, and revolt. Yet its own model never died. Today, we call it global capitalism. The VOC didn't just build a company, it built a corporate playbook, one we still follow. Multinational empires, corporate militarism, financial instruments, vertical control, and above all, the belief that profit justifies power, no matter what the cost. You may think the VOC is a relic, buried in textbooks, museum exhibits, or distant spite routes. But look again, because the VOC didn't just collapse, it evolved. Its DNA lives on in the mega corporation of the 21st century. First, global monopoly and market capture. The VOC was given a monopoly by the Dutch state. Today, corporations build natural monopolies using software, data, and scale. Think about it. Amazon controls over 38% of US e-commerce. Google dominates 90% of search globally. BlackRock manages $10 trillion, more than the GDP of every country except China and the US. These companies don't need muscats to dominate. They use algorithms, regulatory capture, and capital networks. But the principle is the same. If you own the infrastructure, you control the market. Second, global monopoly and market reimagined. Just like the VOC, modern tech giants own the entire stack. Apple designed the chip, builds the device, controls the store, takes a cut of every sale. Amazon controls supply chains from warehouse to doorstep. Tesla owns factories, raw materials, distribution, and software wrapped in a single brand. This isn't efficiency, it's empire by design. Third, financial innovation as control. The VOC invented shares. Today, we have ETFs, synthetic derivatives, shadow banking, DAOs. Financial engineering is no longer about building something real. It's about controlling narratives and extracting value across time zones. The financial system has become so complex, it often escapes legal accountability just as the VOC once did. Fourth, soft power, hard edges. The VOC used warfare. Today's corporations use policy influence, intelligence partnerships, and digital surveillance. Palantir runs defense analytics for the Pentagon. Google once collaborated on military AI under Project Maven. Facebook has shaped election more than any politicians. Like the VOC, these companies don't just trade, they govern attention, manipulate markets, and shape culture. Fifth, externalized costs, internalized profits. The VOC profited from slavery, war, and environmental plunder. Today's firm profit while externalizing cost, climate change, exploited gig labor, data extraction without consent, tax avoidance through global shales. The structure is modern, but the logic is ancient. Maximize profit, outsource the pain. 6. The VOC ghost in the corporate machine. The VOC died in 1799, but its legacy was never buried. It lives on in shareholder supremacy, in the idea that corporations can be more powerful than nations, in the belief that quarterly growth justifies any method. The modern corporation isn't broken. It's functioning exactly as it was designed to by the VOC. As long as we don't recognize that, we'll keep repeating the cycle. Empire, collapse, empire again. The VOC didn't just colonize land, it colonized an idea that a company born from state power could act as its own empire. And that idea never disappeared. It just got smarter, slicker, more acceptable. Today's tech giants don't need cannons. They have algorithms. They don't build forts, they build platforms. Borders don't limit them. Governments rarely control them. And we, the users, the consumers, fuel them with every click, every search, every scroll. Back then, the VOC sailed on wind and war. Today, its legacy rides on cloud servers, logistics data, and predictive AI. The modern VOC doesn't fly a flag. It doesn't answer to a parliament. It answers only to profit. So maybe the real question isn't have we moved on from the VOC, but rather, have we built a world where VOC no longer needs ships because they already own everything else? And if they shape what we buy, what we learn, even what we believe, then maybe we're not post-capitalist, we're just more polite about empire. The VOC is long gone, but the architecture it left behind, profit without accountability, still governs the world we live in. If you're watching this from a major city, buying imported goods, investing in global stocks, you're not outside the system. You're already inside the modern VOC. This isn't just a story about history, it's a map of how power still flows and who benefits. At BlackQoral Insight, we make videos to decode the world behind the headlines, the systems, not just the symptoms. If this made you pause, support us through like, subscribe to BlackQoral Insight, leave your thoughts in the comment. Share it with someone who still thinks corporations are just companies. Because empire don't need thrones anymore. They just need silence. And the VOC proved one thing. The empire never left, and neither should the questions.